As Chuck mentioned, we're starting something new with this panel discussion. Not that we want to keep you away from your golf, but especially here. Up the stairs from here is the Dave Anderson Library. And if you have a chance, stop by and look at it. There's some really good stuff. 2 great portraits of Dave. His Werden Award from 2016. And you know, when we talk about Dave, he's royalty. I mean, he would never say that, but to all of us, I mean, everyone looked up to him. He was such a gentleman and such a legend, and you know, we're happy to remember him here today. We have on the panel here, we have Phil Fabrizio. You met him before, to tell us a little bit about Dave at the club, and of course Bill Pennington and Mark Cannizzaro. Now, it's interesting that Bill Pennington's going to be getting the Werden Award this year. I got it in 2018, and Mark received it in 2022. And I know, I think they'll say the same thing. When you looked at the list of previous winners, you were kind of, you're pretty humbled. And one of the names that stuck out the most was Dave's name. So I'm going to get this started by asking Bill to kind of, I mean, Bill worked with Dave, and although we all kind of worked with him in the press room, I just want to get your perspective on what it was like working with Dave at the time as a teammate.
I mean, it was fantastic. I mean, I knew Dave for years and years before that because I was at the Bergen Record. I was the Yankee beat writer at Bergen Record. Then I was a columnist there for 8 years. And Dave, you know, obviously lived here in Bergen County. But more than that, I remember maybe my first time I was in the Yankee Stadium press box. It was the 1981 World Series. I'm very young, not as young as I could lie and say. But anyway, and I was scared to death. You know, I mean, I was nobody. And Dave came over to me and introduced himself, like I didn't know who he was, and just was the nicest guy. And he did that with everybody. Didn't matter who you were. New face in the press box, Dave would walk over and need anything, let me know, that kind of thing. He was that kind of guy. I have a funny golf story, but I can tell that later if you want.
Yeah, I just want to. Interesting you said that, because Dave did the same thing with me. Jack, 1980 at Baltusrol US Open, Jack was playing a practice round, and I went out there. I was working at the Morristown Record at the time. And Dave was out there, and Dave took the time to introduce me to Jack, which I thought was, I mean, wow. And I was just starting the business, but you're right, he was like that with everybody. Mark, I'm sure you would agree.
Well, the first thing I would say is, I mean, you probably capture this with all of us who knew Dave, is that he would be very embarrassed that we're doing this for him right now, because he was not a guy that he was in the world we live in now with everybody in our business very much attention seekers, especially in the social media age. You know, that just was not Dave. And as Bill said, you know, both of your stories actually are interesting, those quick intros, because I remember being at the Cadillac NFL senior event that was at Upper Montclair every year. And I was kind of nervous to go. I wanted to talk to Arnold Palmer, and Dave was there, and he introduced me to Arnold Palmer, very similarly to what you just said about, you know. But I, like you guys, looked up to Dave. You know, I was a young cub reporter. I covered football as well. Dave was, you know, certainly at Giant Stadium back in the day before it was MetLife, and you know, same thing. He came up and introduced himself to me. You know, I mean. I already knew who he was because I was following everything he wrote, and I was watching the way he conducted himself in locker rooms and at events. So I absolutely looked up to him. And you know, the one thing I would say about Dave as a columnist is, you know, everybody has their different ways of evaluating what you think is a good columnist, but I think that Dave had the best perspective of anybody. If I watched an event and I wanted to see what Dave had to say about it, he always had. He nailed it every time, and so yeah, that's Dave. I mean, but yeah, he would be outside on the putting green right now, you know, working with this putter that he had since he was 16 years old, which is one of my favorite memories. But anyway.
Phil, why don't you tell us a little bit about Dave at the club? This was kind of his oasis. He got away from it here. I mean, and he loved the place. And I think it was a Calamity Jane putter that he had. I think he had it.
He's very proud of that.
48, I believe. He put it in a bag, and it never left the bag after that. But that was wonderful when you read to us the forward that he had written for the anniversary book. But what was it like? What was Dave like as a member, just with the guys?
Very consistent with what was described, because he was not a celebrity at Knickerbocker. If he was in this room, he'd be uncomfortable because you guys all recognize what he's about. But at Knickerbocker, there are a lot of people that don't know. Dave joined the club in 1980, and as membership evolves, fewer and fewer people know the old timers. But Dave was able to come here. He typically played as a back in the day. Now we have tee times, online tee times, but we didn't have them back then. And Dave used to play with his good friend was Dr. Michael McKellis, and they would play oftentimes as a twosome. They would go out 10 o'clock or so that they didn't hold anybody up. He always had the same white pants on that he would play in all the time, and he was he just blended in. He wasn't a guy that hung around a lot. But when you had the opportunity to play with him, you talk a little bit about golf, but you would love to get him on topics unrelated to golf. How, his, a Joe Namath story, or a Muhammad Ali story, or a Jack Nicklaus story, or just in general, the way his generation and his style of reporting was compared to, what it is now. So he was just a delightful, humble, quiet guy, and I think being at a club like Knickerbocker, which is a pretty low-key place, suited him very well.
We all thought of Dave as the consummate gentleman, although he could throw the barbs out there if need be. Jimmy Roberts told me a story. Going back to the Ryder Cup at the Country Club, 1999, if you remember, there was the backstory was that these guys wanted to be paid and everything else, and Jimmy was a pretty much unknown guy just starting out then too, and I forgot who it was, but it was a representative of the PGA of America got up there at a press conference, and Jimmy asked a question about pay for play, and this guy just put him down. I mean, he just didn't answer the question, but just killed him, just put him in his place. He sat right down, and then so he thought he would. So the PGA of America executive figured that he would turn the press conference toward something else real quickly. So he figured, oh, I'll call on Dave Anderson here. So he calls on Dave, and he says, yes, Dave, what's your question? He said, I would like you to answer Jimmy's question. So that was Dave, and it was one of the great moments.
Yeah, he did that many times.
Yeah.
He did that many times. He would support, and again, it could be people he didn't even know. Some random person who came to the press conference, but Dave thought it was a fair question, and then he'd say, well, why didn't you answer the previous question? And then I remember Ray Hanley, the coach, the Giants coach. He had this famous blow-up that ended up getting him fired at the end of the year. I mean, just really embarrassing thing where he walked out on the press conference. And it's kind of lost in history that Dave didn't ask the original question. Russ Solzberg did. It was kind of an inflammatory question somewhat. Fair question, and Hanley said, I'm not answering that. And then Russ said, why aren't you answering that? And so this went on a couple different times. And finally he said, Ray said, I'm not talking to you anymore, to Solzberg. So then he said, let's have somebody else, Dave. And Dave did the exact same thing. He said, I want you to ask, those were all fair questions, answer the question. And then Ray got up and just stormed out, which, I mean, that's one of the more famous things that happened in press conference histories in New York. And it's all because Dave stood up for Russ, which is the kind of thing he would do.
And he had the cachet because he was Dave Anderson, but he didn't throw his weight around. And I mean, Phil, I'm sure you knew him, obviously, the club here. Did you ever see Dave pissed off in your life? I mean, but he had a way, a very proper way of being sharp that way. Where even in his writing. I mean, we write columns, and we're in a different age now, and everybody's got the hot take, and we got to rip this guy, or whatever. Aaron Judge is struck out 12 times against the Red Sox last week, and everybody's got to rip Aaron Judge, even though he's the best player in the world. Dave had this very, very tactical way about being critical of somebody in a column, but not over the top, unfair, and it just, you know what I mean? It was just kind of it was the velvet hammer to some degree, where he would, he'd get his point across, and he would criticize a manager or whomever, a football player, but it wasn't in an unfair, look at me, I'm slamming my fist against the dais like, so many people do nowadays.
Yeah.
So the other side of Dave, Mark and I and Bill, we played a lot of golf on the road over the years. Kind of bring our clubs everywhere.
Still do.
Well, you do. I would like to. But, the Open Championship would come. We played 7 times if we go over there for the Open. We played more than the guys that missed the cut. But that goes back to Dave. That actually started with Dave. Dave was at the Journal American. He was the Dodgers beat writer when they were in Brooklyn for the Journal American, and of course they went everywhere by train back then. I think St. Louis was the furthest western team, and Dave brought his clubs on the train with him, so he started that tradition.
I didn't know that. That's
yeah.
pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah. And to carry that forward, I'm gonna let you talk about, because I want to add something, but talk about. I know what you know what I want you to talk.
Yeah, so it was the late 1990s, and I was now at the New York Times, and I covered a lot of stuff with Dave. We, as the beat writer or the game story guy, and Dave would be the columnist. A lot of NFL, a lot of major championship golf, other golf, boxing matches. We were together a lot, and Dave, early on, he said to me, "So okay, here's the deal." He says, "I want you to make all the flight arrangements, and I want you to make the hotel arrangements." And I was going and saying, "Okay, And then he said, "And I'll make the tea times, and I'll make the dinner reservation." Because Dave could get a tea time anywhere. Back then the New York Times owned Golf Digest as well, so he wrote for Golf Digest for like 30 years. He was on the panel that picked the top 100 courses. He was, very influential, and of course he had won a Pulitzer. It made a million different things that happened. So, and he also knew everybody. And you would not only, when he picked the dinner, you would not only go to the best place in dinner that nobody else go to the reservation. You'd be sitting at a table with like Al Davis, or the people that he would just gravitate towards him. And you're right. He also used to pick on Al Davis all the time, but Al Davis would still show up and have dinner with him. But anyway, so what Hank's referring to was it was NFC Championship game in San Francisco, and you were probably at the AFC game.
Yeah.
And so Hank and I were covering that. So anyway, I made the hotel and dinner. I made the hotel and flight arrangements, and Dave said, "Okay, we're playing at this place, San Juan Oaks South, brand new Fred Couples course. So we're going down there on Saturday, the day before the game." So Hank was part of that. So we drove down. It was raining all the way down there. Not super hard, but it was raining, and we found out it had rained for 2 days before that there. So when we got into the pro shop, the pro came to us and said, first he was very excited to meet Dave, and he said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Anderson," he says, "but we're just going to have a cart path only rule today. I know we have a very hilly course, and there's going to be some long walks from the top of the hill down into the fairway, but we've just got too much rain, the grass is still young, we can't do it any other way. So we're fine." So Dave had his own cart, Hank and I were in our car, it was just the 3 of us, and we head out. The 5th hole, we're down in the fairway, pretty much the balls close together. Dave's up ahead of us, and we're sort of getting ready to hit, and all of a sudden we hear like this kind of gasp, a little yelp, like some clicking, and then like a slamming noise, and we look up, and David just got like 2 wheels off the edge of the cart path, and it all of a sudden started sliding down the hill, and then the cart righted itself, and he's now at the wheel, and he's slamming on the brake, and by now the cart is just hydroplaning, and it's going down this hill and across the fairway, and it's picking up speed, and at the other end of the fairway was a large pond. So we're just watching this, and then when about 15 yards before he gets to the pond, Dave throws himself out the side of the cart backwards. He hits the ground, his glasses go flying, his hat goes flying, and the cart goes roaring into the pond and is submerged up to the seat. So we run over to Dave, we help him up. I gave him his glasses. Hank gave him his hat. Are you okay, Dave? You okay? You sure? Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine. You know, and he was. Looked a little shaken, but he was fine. And you and I waded into the pond, got his golf clubs off the cart, carried him back up the hill, put it in our cart, and we just continued to play. And there was almost nobody out there because it was raining and it was cart only and it wasn't an easy walk. And so we're just playing. And this was very, very early cell phone days, even before flip phones, I think. So it wasn't like, oh, let's call anybody. I mean, that didn't even cross anybody's mind. We were just playing. But, you know, we knew, at least I remember. So what I remember was, at one point Dave was like on the other side of the course and Hank and I were standing there, and I said to him, Hank, what the hell are we gonna tell the pro at the turn about what happened to the other golfer? And it's not only not with us, it's submerged in the pond. And it's about 70 yards from the nearest cart path. What are we gonna say, you know? And so we just kept, and Hank's like, I don't know. I mean, we didn't know. And so we kept walking, kept playing, and right around in the 8th hole, all of a sudden 2 carts come driving out towards us. Yeah. 2 guys, 1 in each cart. And they were guys from the pro shop. The first guy gets out, excuse me, and he says, Mr. Anderson, I'm so sorry, are you all right? And Dave says, yeah. He says, I don't know what happened with that cart. It must have been malfunction. We're so sorry. I don't understand, but you're sure you're okay? Yes, I'm fine. And he says, well, geez, take this cart and enjoy the rest of your round. And he just leaves. So we play the rest of the round. Rain kind of stops. We had kind of a good day. And we walk into the pro shop, and Dave, as he always did, goes up to the pro. The pro's there to meet him. We ask for the pro. The pro comes out. He meets him. He says, we really enjoyed our time. Thanks for hosting us. He's talking about the things he liked. He liked the green complexes. He liked this hole. He liked that hole. Everything was wonderful, blah, blah, blah. And the guy says, geez, thank you so much. You know, I'm glad you had a good time. It's good to see you're okay. You know, Dave says, yeah, I'm fine. You know, and he says, turns to us, he says, well, okay, fellas, I'm going to go out and get the car. I'll meet you, and we'll pick up the bags, and we'll leave, Dave says. So he leaves, and I'm standing there, and I turn to the pro. I said, I got to ask. I don't know how you knew that the cart was in the pond. And he said, and don't you want to know what happened? I mean, aren't you at least curious what happened? You know? And he goes, no. He says, I don't want an answer. And somebody else, one of our other employees, saw the cart, and we knew it was Mr. Anderson's cart. And we just assumed something had to have gone wrong, that it was our fault, and that's it. I don't want to know the answer. And and Dave pulled up, and we left, and I was walking on. I just thought to myself, this is the kind of utmost respect he engendered. He didn't even know this guy until that day, and yet that's how that guy thought of him. He just thought, well, if it's Dave's cart, if it had been Hank or I don't know what he would have done. But yeah, we were arrested. But Dave, thank you so much for being here. So glad you're not hurt, and that was that.
I'm going to add a little thing. I have a prelude to that story. So we're heading out to the golf course, and we're on an interstate, I believe. We're a very busy highway in California. And Dave has to relieve himself. of course, so we pull over near an overpass, and Dave gets out of the car, does what he has to do. So I said, I'm very taken by the scene, and I said to Bill, I said, hey, Bill, how many people going by realize that there's a Pulitzer Prize winner taking the piss? It was true, but you know, just a wonderful man. I got one more to add, but again, this was we covered the Skins game on Thanksgiving out in PJ West's, and Joey Goldstein, the old time PR guy, had called up my boss, Greg Gallo, at the Post. I was at the Post at the time, and said, look, we'll get your guy, we'll fly your guy out there to cover the Skins game. We'll pay his expenses and everything. So naturally, Gallo says, sure, because there was going to be the Giants were playing the 49ers, and that was the Bavaro game where he drags 5 guys on his back. So we went from the Skins game, and we flew up, and Dave arranged with the USGA to play the Olympic Club, and I think the Open was going to be there the next year, that year. So we get there, it's a beautiful day, man, it was just gorgeous, and we pull into the parking lot, we're the only people there, right? And we get out of the car, and we get the clubs, we're looking around, and there's some guy, he's hightailing it in a cart. He was I don't know what he was in charge of, but he was certainly in charge of seeing who was getting onto the golf course. And he comes by, he says, I don't know what you guys are doing. It's, this is the golf course is closed today. No one's to be on it, And he's, well, I don't. We're just like, well, I don't know. So the USJ had its headquarters there because they were already getting ready for the Open. And we see somebody coming up from that side. And he sees us, and he says, well, what's going on here? And I said, maybe Dave explained that, we arranged to play that. He says, nope. He says, listen here, he says to the guy. He says, these gentlemen are guests of the USGA, and they are to be accorded the blue ribbon treatment. And of course, this guy was coming by every hole to see if we needed anything after that. That was the blue ribbon treatment. But the rest, from then on, Dave and I would always, whenever we played golf, we'd say, are we getting the blue ribbon treatment? But I'll tell you what, with that Calamity Jane putter, he was making a lot of putts. Did he make a lot of putts here with that putter?
He did.
Did he win a lot of matches? I know you're a 1.7 index, but did he? Oh,
If I had played him, he would have won a lot more.
Right.
But, no,
Right.
like I said, he was just a quiet gentleman, and I'd say 90% of the membership didn't know there was royalty on the premises when he was around.
2017 Masters press room. Dave was already in a nursing home, and I'd call him occasionally. Augusta had just opened the new and quite over-the-top press building, which I've never been in, by the way. Even going to the point of serving stone crab at lunch, an incredibly expensive food. Yeah, if you've never been there, you should be on your list. Dave always told me that he loved it when the Super Bowl would be played in Miami, so he'd go to Joe's Stone Crab in Miami Beach. I think he ate stone crabs there almost every night. So I called Dave to tell him about the new press center and the stone crabs. When I did, there was a pause, and he said, I'd trade them both for an armband. Because as you know, Brooke, the Masters is the only tournament where we can't get inside the ropes. And he says, to that end, Dave was a newspaper man covering the big events. So that's Martin. Thank you, Martin. All right. Well, thank you for listening to us. I hope we were entertaining. So, thank you guys for joining us.